Going to start off with verse 186. And in our previous sessions, we have been seeing that in this section of Surah Baqarah, the Sharia that was to be given to the newly instituted Muslim Ummah from among the Bani Ismail or the Ishmaelites was given to them. The Sharia was actually a revival of the Sharia given to Prophet Abraham. We have seen how various directives of the Sharia were given. We've seen how the Sharia of the fast, we have seen qisas, we have seen will testaments, and something similar earlier on in our sessions. And all these directives of the Sharia, of course, are meant as a revival of the Abrahamic Sharia, and there are certain things which are explained by the Quran as well. Over a period of years, we know that there were some additions that were made to some of the directives of Abraham's Sharia, and of course there were distortions as well. So it was essential that the Quran remove them and once again revive them. So we now start off with verse 186. The words are وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِ فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. And O prophets, when my servants question you about any of my directives, tell them, I am near them at this time. I answer the prayer of the suppliant when he calls me. Therefore, let them follow my directive and put their faith in me so that they remain on the right path. So we know that as far as the right path is concerned, which the Quran has referred to here, it is something which we need to also understand, that the guidance of the Almighty was available at that time. The Wahi was being revealed, the Quran was being sent down, and thus people are asked that if they have any questions, then it is the time for them to ask these questions. So the words are إِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي, when my servants, they need to ask me something, فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, I am near them, which means that at the time of this revelation, if they ask questions, their questions shall be answered. Of course, these questions should not be unnecessary questions. They are questions which need any explanation. And we also know that as far as Prophet Muhammad is concerned, and we will see this as we go along in Surah Baqarah, that questions were posed to him, and he answered those questions at the behest of the Almighty. And we also know that at times immediate answers were given to the Prophet as an explanation of the previous directive given. And whenever this explanation would be given, the Quran uses the words كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ, which means that in this way does God explain to the people their directives, or these directives. And this verse is called the verse of Tabiyeen, which means that in accordance with the promise which the Quran made in Surah Qiyamah, that if any directive would need any explanation on the part of God, he would furnish it. So while referring to that directive of Surah Qiyamah, whenever we have these Tabiyeen verses, whenever we have these explanatory verses, the reference again goes to those verses of Surah Qiyamah, and we find verses such as كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ, in this manner does the Almighty explain, so that it becomes evident that the promise that he had made, that whenever there is some questions that need to be answered, or whenever there are things that might cause any confusion, then people need not worry, because at times questions which even arise in one's minds, and they're not even put into words, the Almighty takes them up and answers them as his gracious favor on the Muslim Ummah. Now we move to the next part of this verse. So we have أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَعَفَا عَنْكُمْ فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل ولا تباشروهن وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد تلك حدود الله فلا تقربوها كذلك يبين الله آياته للناس لعلهم يتقون. Since you want to ask this, let me answer that it has been made lawful for you to go to your wives in the nights of the fast, They are a garment to you, and you are a garment to them. So the first thing which is mentioned here is that, of course, as far as this question is concerned, whether during the fast, whether men and women can be intimate after breaking their fast at nights, the Almighty knew that this question is in the minds of people, and so He addressed it and said, yes, it is absolutely lawful for you. But because of the fact that people thought that this might not be okay, considering some of the directives which are given to the previous nations, so they, in their own conscience, felt when they were intimate with their wives that they are doing something wrong. So the Quran said, although it is not wrong as far as the Sharia is concerned, but since you considered something to be wrong, then you must understand that you must follow your conscience. It is not that you should disregard your conscience, even if it is something which is ultimately comes out to be against what the dictates of God Himself are, because by that time they didn't know whether they should go to their wives at night or not. But since they thought that they should not go, the Almighty says that, well, whatever you think, you should follow that, and which actually tells us, which gives us this golden principle that if a person forms an opinion according to his conscience or her conscience, then that conscience must be followed, even if it ultimately is a thing which against the Quran, which is the purport of the Quran, which tells us that forming an opinion with sincerity, forming an opinion in line with our conscience, is the demand of the Almighty, even if it is ultimately not the purport of the Almighty or the Quran. And this is a very, very important guidance. So we find immediately the next words telling us, but before I go on to translate the next verse, an important part of this verse that we have just studied is that they are a garment for you and you are a garment to them. This is a very, very important aspect which the Quran has said, that men and women, when they come together as husband and wife, they are like an apparel to each other. They are like garments to one another, which means that they hide one another in a way that their private desires, their personal desires, their intimate desires are the ones which, of course, are ones which are covered by each other. They are the ones which are fulfilled by each other. Of course, it also relates to protection, just as our own dress, our own apparel, our own garments, they protect us from heat, from cold. So in a very similar way, men and women, or husband and wife to be more precise, they are a means of protection also for one another. But the dominant part here is that as far as women are concerned and wives are concerned and husbands are concerned, they should know that they are a means of fulfilling one another's intimate desires, and therefore this is something which is very becoming if they relent in this matter and they are in harmony with one another, because this is one area where if there is some dissent from either of the spouses without any reason, then it may become a reason for one of the spouses to look out of that marriage bond, which is highly inadvisable. So the Quran says that God saw that you were deceiving yourselves, so He has relented towards you and pardoned you. So this is the thing that I was mentioning earlier, that God saw that you were deceiving yourselves. The words are kuntum takhtanuna anfusakum. You were being dishonest with yourselves, which means that you thought that going to your wives at night, even after you have broken your fast, is not a correct thing. This is what you thought. But you went against your conscience and you had marital contact with them. So the Quran says that although this is something that you did which was unbecoming, but God has relented. He has forgiven you. And as I said, it tells us this principle, a very, very important principle, that you have to follow your conscience. Whatever you think is right, you must follow it, even if it ultimately turns out to be incorrect, because God is going to hold you answerable, or hold us answerable, for what we sincerely form an opinion, keeping in you the voice of our conscience. And then it says, therefore, without any hesitation, you may now go to your wives and seek its consequence that God has ordained for you, and eat and drink until the white thread of the dawn is totally evident to you from the black thread of the night. Then complete the fast until nightfall. And bear in mind that if you are stationed for i'tikaf in the mosques, do not go to your wives even at night. These are the bounds set by God, so do not go near them. In this manner, God explains his revelations to people so that they may attain piety. So the important thing here, once again, being the fact that as far as the fast is concerned, the Quran is specified that atimmu siyama ila layl, that you should complete the fast until nightfall. And it is here that we can understandably also argue that there is a difference between two major Muslim sects, the Shiites and the Sunni sects, and regarding the time of nightfall, or regarding the time when the fast should be broken. And it is precisely because of this interpretation of the words atimmu siyama ilal layl, that you complete your fast until the night. So what exactly does this mean? So one sect thought and understood from these words that as soon as night arrives, we should break our fast. And when does night arrive? So one group of people think that as soon as there is sunset, and as soon as the sun goes down, this is the signal for the fact that night has now arrived. So therefore, they break their fast in this manner as soon as the night arrives, in the form of sunset. And the Shiites think that as far as the arrival of night is concerned, sunset is not exactly the time at which night arrives, because you still have some light. And for them, the appearance of the first star in the skies is the signal as far as the night is concerned. And this is that difference that does arrive and does arise, and it's there. So the point that I would like to make here is that the words of the Quran, atimmu siyama ila layl, the word layl, the word night or nightfall to be more precise, is the word that can have these interpretations, and there is no need to condemn the other interpretation, because as far as the words of the Quran are concerned, they can, of course, be words in which both these interpretations literally could be possible. So what nightfall could mean to one could be different for other people. And in this regard, we have to understand that as far as the Quran is concerned, that this is something which we have to understand, that interpretation of the Quran and interpretation of the scriptures is subject to human intellect, and as human intellect goes along, it is something which can always have a difference of opinion, and this difference of opinion has to be understood in its right spirit. So the words, as you can see, are that La tubashiruhunna wa antum aqifuna fil masajid, that once you are stationed in the mosques, you should not be intimate with your wives, which is a further explanation that if you're fasting and you're not doing i'tikaf, then yes, at night time you can go near your wives, or in other words, once you break your fast, it is allowed for you to have marital intimate contact with your wives, but not in the case when you are sitting for i'tikaf in the mosque. So as far as the i'tikaf is concerned, whether you are fasting or not fasting, I mean, once you've broken your fast, even then you must understand that you cannot have intimate relations with your wife. And then comes that tabyin verse which I just referred to, kazalika yubayyinu Allah, which means that as far as the Quran is concerned, you must understand that God keeps answering these questions that you have in your mind, or they might arise, or they might be being discussed amongst you. But don't worry, if these questions are there, then they shall be answered in due time. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ لِتَأْكُلُوا فَرِيقًا مِّنْ أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ بِالْإِثْمِ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And it is the requirement of this piety that you do not devour one another's wealth by unjust means, nor make it a means to reach those in authority, so that you may get a chance to wrongfully usurp a part of the wealth of people, even though you know this usurpation. So in between these directives, we have seen that with the last verse that we just studied, the directives related to fasting and i'tikaf ended, and now we have entered into a new directive, and Ustaz has related this to the previous directive by telling us that actually the common thing here is that it's the piety which is being discussed, and it thus therefore the common point between the two, or the munasbah between the two directives, is that the requirement of piety, just as that requirement of piety entails that you have to follow the directive of God vis-a-vis the fast, there's no such, there's nothing different in the case of illegal gratification also. And before the Quran actually proscribes it in such unequivocal words, it has said, it has given a principal statement, La ta'kulu amwalakum bainakum bil batil, which means that do not consume or devour one another's wealth in unjust ways. And this is a statement, as I said, which is in principle, and this principle is something which tells us that everything in which a person devours another person's wealth in an illegal way, in an unjust way, for example, extortion, for example, being dishonest in any way, breaching trust in this manner, illegal gratification, which you see is mentioned right after that, that you present money, you give money, whatever you may call it, speed money or illegal money, which you would like to give to the authorities in order to do your work done or have your work done. The Quran says that this is not allowed because this falls under illegal gratification, and this illegal gratification is something which again is like consuming or devouring the wealth of other people, or devouring wealth amongst your own selves in an unjust way. And one thing that I'd also like to explain here is the real meaning of illegal gratification. So remember, when you are giving money to obtain a favor, and that favor is something that you don't deserve, this is what we call as illegal gratification. As far as paying money, which has now become a necessity in many third world countries, in order to have your just, something which you justly deserve to be accomplished, you have to pay money even to accomplish that. So although if you should avoid it, or you could avoid it, you must avoid it. But at times it does become impossible unless you pay that money. So that cannot be classified in any way as illegal gratification. But because remember, the difference between having gratified the seniors or the superiors in the government is to obtain an illegal favor, or is to obtain something which does not behoove of you, you should not deserve. But things that you rightfully deserve, at times you need to, pay for that as well. Although also this is something which one should avoid as much as possible. But if one is pushed to the limits and does so, then it cannot be classified as illegal gratification. So before we go on to study the next portions, or the next part of the verses of this section, if you have any questions until this time that we have studied these verses, please raise them now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Shabana Ansari, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
डॉक्टर साहब, इसमें जैसे अहले मक्का को जब कुरान नाजिल हो रहा है तो उनको कहा जा रहा है कि आप सवाल करें, तो हमारे यहाँ तो इसको इस तरह लेते हैं ना कि ये मतलब अल्लाह ताला जो है वो शहरक से ज्यादा करीब है, तो आप दुआ करें और अल्लाह ताला आपकी दुआ, मतलब हमारे लिए तो ये उनके लिए तो सवालों का था। तो अगर हम दुआ करते हैं तो हमारी दुआ कबूल होती है, और ये भी कि मतलब अल्लाह सुनता है। और दूसरी वो जो रिवायात में कहा जाता है कि अगर नहीं कबूल होती तो 3 तरह से या रख लिया जाता है, या गुनाह माफ करता है, या अल्लाह आखिरत के लिए रख लेता है। तो इसके बारे में कुछ बताइएगा।
So that is another, that has been mentioned elsewhere in the Quran, and that is another important area. These particular verses, actually they refer to the revelation of the Quran, and they are addressing the Sahaba, that if you have any questions while the Quran is now being revealed, if you pose those questions to the Prophet, or maybe even having them in your mind, then God is going to answer them and even preserve them in the Quran. So the context of this verse is confined to what I've just said. However, in Surah Qaf, we have these words of the Almighty, "Nahnu aqrabu ilayhi min hablil warid," which mean that I am closer, or we are closer to you than your life vein, which means that we know what you have in your mind, and what something which is of intensely close proximity. So that is another, that's another independent area, that as human beings, as people who would like to make dua to the Almighty, to ask Him as a suppliant. So, of course, this is something which is highly encouraged. We know there is a hadith which says, "Ad-du'a mukhul ibadah," and there's another one which says, "Ad-du'a huwal ibadah," which means that this supplication is in fact worship itself. So, to worship, to make dua to the Almighty, to pray to the Almighty, is something that as individuals this is our sole connection with God. I mean, it's one of the very important connection that we have, other than the prayer, of course, because now we are in connection with, or in union, so to speak, with God. As far as the answer of God is concerned, that is answered. I mean, that is something which has been explained by Hadith literature, that at times your dua is not immediately accepted. At times it is deferred, and at times you just excuse me. As at times it just becomes a store of good deed for you in the hereafter. So that, as I said, is a totally independent topic that has been covered elsewhere in the Quran.
Ruhi Rasul, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, it's verse 188. I couldn't understand this, the meaning of this phrase. وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ. How is it related to وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ
This is one form of aklul amwal bil batil. So the Quran has said that do not consume or devour wealth through illegal means. And one example of this is that you present money to those in authority to have your work done. So tudlu biha ilal hukam is to literally, the dalwa is like a bucket that you throw into a well. So this is the literal meaning, but here idiomatically it means tudlu biha ilal hukam, that you use it to reach those in authority. I mean, you are able to fulfill or gratify your own desire or your need by paying money to the authorities. This is what we call rishwa in the Urdu language, of course, in the Arabic also. And illegal gratification.
Sir, it means rishwat?
Yes,
Sir, it means
does. Yes,
okay. Thank
exactly
you,
that.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all of the raised hands, so I think we can proceed now.
Okay. يسألونك عن الأهلة قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج وليس البر بأن تأتوا البيوت من ظهورها ولكن البر من اتقى وأتوا البيوت من أبوابها واتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون. They question you about the sacred months. Say, they are a time for the welfare of people and for the pilgrimage. Therefore, this sanctity of theirs will continue the way it was. And now that you have raised the question, you should know that this certainly is not a virtue, that you enter your dwellings from the back while wearing the ihram and returning from Hajj. In fact, real virtue is of the person who adheres to piety. Therefore, enter now your dwellings by their doors only and remain fearful of God so that you may prosper. So the first thing that is mentioned here as far as these verses are concerned, they relate to the word ahilla. So we have to understand that as far as the word ahilla is concerned, it is used here in a very specific sense. The word ahilla, of course, is the plural of hilal, and hilal is something which we call the new moon. So hilal is the new moon, and it also signifies a month. In fact, when the word ahilla, I mean the way it is used here in the plural, it always signifies a month. So therefore, it's not the sacred months about which the question is being. It's not about the moon about which the question is being asked, as has been generally translated, because hilal, as I said, is the singular, and ahilla is the plural. So hilal here, when used in this plural form, it doesn't refer to the moon. It actually signifies month. So that is precisely what is meant here. And we will see as this verse goes along that the question is actually about not just the month, but the sacred months. So the question about them was also asked and raised. And the Quran says that these are months in which the pilgrimage takes place. People also opt for their umrah. So therefore, their sanctity will continue, and there will be no war in these 4 months. We know that these 4 months are the months in which there is no war. This was an Arab custom that they might be warring throughout the year, but as soon as these sacred months would arrive, they were abstained from war so that people could go for pilgrimage. And one important thing here is the alif lam appended to ahilla. as you can see in the Quranic verse here, that it says, "Yas'alunaka anil ahilla." So ahilla is, al-ahilla, which means that these months. So the words, the word itself tells us that it's not at all kinds of months are being asked. The question is not about all sorts of months. The question is about the sacred months, and therefore it is said that as far as the sacred months are concerned, they are these months in which, as far as the Quran is telling us, you have to obey the original custom, that there would be no war, there would be nothing, there would be no bloodshed in any way. So this question actually has been asked after halting the main discourse. So remember, the Quran gave an answer to this question. It started to mention the directives which related to jihad, infaq, hajj, and umrah, which were originally meant to be mentioned here. From among these, the matter of jihad and infaq, they are discussed originally, but this is not the case with hajj and umrah. They are an established sunnah that the Prophet has instituted. So now we are moving towards the mention of the ritual of hajj. And as I said, once the Quran has answered these questions by halting the main discourse, the main original discussion has been brought back, and directives regarding hajj, of course, now are coming up. And again, it's not that the hajj is being discussed originally. We know that it was an Abrahamic sunnah, and people were well versed with hajj, and they knew what hajj was all about. Only questions which might have arisen about hajj, or there were certain religious innovations that the Quraysh had invented in the name of hajj or for hajj, that they are being set right. Now, this one innovation which is mentioned here is that people, as you can see, they would enter, they would not, once they would return from ihram, they would not enter from the same path as they would have left their own house. They would come from the back. So the Quran says that this, as if they might have thought that, well, they left their houses in a state of sin, and now that they have come back, being cleansed of this sin, now they need to enter from another part of their house. The Quran says this is not on. Leaving a house from one part and entering from another part is not going to be instrumental in cleansing yourself. It's not, something which is of any substantive importance. So this is what the Quran has also once again said, that as far as piety is concerned, as far as one's intentions are concerned, you have to understand that you enter your houses from their front doors. There's no piety involved in the fact that once you return from Hajj, you enter your houses from the back door. So this was a very something which was in vogue in the Quraysh. And this also brings me to this very important discussion which I have raised earlier on and on some occasions, and which might also do you good to note here, that you see the Quran is discussing, if the Quran has been revealed as the final word of God, the Quran is discussing the final mission of the final prophet, the way he went about discharging his mission. So therefore, things which are related to that mission are bound to come into discussion, and therefore on such occasions it provides that localized guidance which was there. And so therefore we have to understand that when the Quran speaks to us, there are a lot of things which it is going to discuss which are meant for that particular occasion, because simply after that the things that never were there. And this is one example that you can see, that the Quraysh had this religious innovation that they would leave their houses when going to Hajj from the front door, and when they would return, they would enter their houses not from the front door, but from the back door. So you can clearly see that this was a practice which was undertaken by the Quraysh. And if the Quran has corrected that practice, then of course it is meant for the Quraysh to take heed or pay heed to it. So for us, it's like a narration of a past event. We cannot draw any lesson, so to speak, or an immediate guidance out of it, because we don't do that. However, the guidance which indirectly can be drawn is that any religious innovation that has absolutely no basis in religion must be done away with, and we have to stick to the Quran and Sunnah as far as the sources of religion are concerned. Innovations are things which take us away, and any innovation like this is something that must be abstained from. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ وَاقْتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ ثَقِفْتُمُوهُمْ وَأَخْرِجُوهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَخْرَجُوكُمْ وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ وَلَا تُقَاتِلُوهُمْ عِنْدَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ حَتَّى يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ فِيهِ فَإِنْ قَاتَلُوكُمْ فَاقْتُلُوهُمْ كَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ فَإِنِ انْتَهَوْا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ وَقَاتِلُوهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةٌ وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ لِلَّهِ فَإِنِ انْتَهَوْا فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. And fight in the way of God with those who fight against you to stop you from offering Hajj, and do not transgress bounds in this fighting. So Muslims are now being told to offer the Hajj of the Baytullah, and during this journey to do Hajj, to offer Hajj, if they encounter any hindrance, any impediment, they are told that yes, they can also lift arms, because they are now going to the Baytullah to offer Hajj. And if they are attacked, of course they should not initiate any attack, but if they are attacked, then they can retaliate. And kill those who fight you wherever you find them, and drive them out of the place from which they drove you out. And remember that persecution is worse than killing. And this is something which is extremely important, that persecution is something which is worse than killing. So the Quraysh were persecuting the believers. They were not allowing them, or they, at least in their own stance, they would not allow them to come for the pilgrimage of the Baytullah. So precisely for this reason, the Quran is telling them this is persecution. And persecution is such a big crime that it is bigger than murder. It is bigger than killing people, which is an eye-opener. It should be an eye-opener that such is the heinous nature, such is the extreme intense nature of persecution. And what does persecution mean? Persecution means that you forcibly don't allow people to practice religion. This is what persecution means, that you stop them from discharging their religious duties in a forceful way. For example, I mean, this is one example of persecution. Other examples could be that you don't allow them to pray, you don't allow them to fast, you don't allow them to do whatever is incumbent upon them. So when you use force for this, as the Quraysh would have likely to be done, and we see that they did also, and the Quran says that such persecution is worse than killing. I mean, we know how bad a thing to kill someone is. So imagine that the Quran is telling us that persecution is even worse. So if the Quraysh are stopping Muslims from doing Hajj, and if they're using force for it, then even if these haram months are there, then Muslims can retaliate, but they must not initiate any attack. So the Quran says, drive wherever you find them, and drive them out of the place from which they drove you out. And remember that persecution is worse than killing. And do not initiate war with them near the sacred mosque unless they wage war against you in it. Sacred mosque, of course, referring to the Baytullah, the Kaaba. So they cannot, initiate war, but if they are attacked, then they can retaliate. So the Quran says, then if they wage war with you, slay them without any hesitation. Thus is the punishment of such disbelievers. However, if they desist, God is forgiving, ever merciful. And keep fighting this war against them until persecution ends. And in this land, religion is for God alone. However, if they desist, you should know that an offensive is only allowed against the unjust. So the important thing that we have to understand here, as the Quran has said, that these are the directives that have to be followed at all costs. We have this very important directive here, that the reason for jihad, of course, is that fitna, of course, has to be dispelled. And this fitna or persecution, the word fitna actually literally here has been translated as persecution, but because this is what the Quran has used the word for. So we say that as far as the Quran is concerned, it has regarded persecution to be a worse crime than murder and than killing itself is concerned. So if they these Quraysh, they pick up arms against Muslims, they are allowed to fight back. And فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا, the desist, the part which is mentioned here, does not mean that they desist from war. It actually means that they desist from disbelief. فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا. So if they desist from disbelief, then the Quran says that, of course, this is something which can be done. So we can clearly see that the war which is being mentioned here has these two objectives as the Quran is concerned. The first one is referred to by the word fitna, which is, of course, means war against persecution. And this, of course, is something which is to continue wherever there is war, whenever there is a need for using arms. So to curb persecution is something which even today, whenever there is any persecution in any Muslim or non-Muslim country, so other Muslim countries if all diplomatic ties fail and all other pressures exerted fail, then they can, in order to curb persecution, they can use militant means. But the other objective which is mentioned here is to fight until all of them submit to the authority, or all of them convert. They profess themselves to be believers. This is something which is specific to the era of the Prophet, and no war can be now fought in this for this purpose. So war is to be fought today, if at all it is needed, only to curb persecution, and it cannot be fought in any way to punish people for disbelief, as has been mentioned here. So as far as the Quran is concerned, we have to be absolutely clear regarding the directives of jihad, regarding the directives of offensive warfare, that this offensive warfare in the name of God can only be undertaken when the situation is of persecution. As far as the wars of the Prophet are concerned, they had both these shades within them. They had the shade of persecution, and also they were fought in order to punish people for disbelief. So this second purpose of punishing people for disbelief is specific to the messengers of God, and after them, this punishment of disbelief can only be administered in the hereafter, and that was what the Almighty is going to do. He did it in the times of the era of the messengers also. He's going to do it when people come to him in the hereafter. But in the post-prophetic era, in the era between Prophet Muhammad and the Day of Judgment, the only form of warfare that now remains is war against persecution. And that too is not an obligation, of course. It's something which is a recommendation that whenever you have the power, you have the strength to do so, and at the same time, diplomatic ties fail, diplomatic means fail to stop the country which is committing this aggression of persecution, only then, of course, this should be resorted to. So now we move on to the next portion. It says, "Ash-shahrul haram bish-shahril haram wal hurumatu qisas faman i'tada alaykum fa'tadu alayhi bimithli ma i'tada alaykum wattaqullah wa'lamu anna Allaha ma'al muttaqin." A sacred month for a sacred month, and similarly other things too are subject to retaliation. Thus those who transgress against you retaliate in equal measure only, and keep fearing God, and keep in mind that God is with those who remain within the bounds set by Him. وَأَنْفِقُوا سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ وَأَحْسِنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And for this jihad, spend for the cause of God, and by evading it, do not with your own hands cast yourselves into destruction. And do this spending graciously, because God loves those who are gracious. So Muslims are, once again, they are being told that as far as the Quran is concerned, it's absolutely clear that if there is this sanctity of the sacred months, if they violate this sanctity, then Muslims too have the right to wage war against them, because they're not initiating war, they're just defending their own selves. And if this is what they have to do, then they should think that this is in no way violating the sanctity of the Ashurul Hurum, or the sacred months, because it is not they who have done so, it is their opponents who have done so, and they are just retaliating. And as far as the infaq portion is concerned, you can see how beautifully the Quran interconnects and says that anfiqu fi sabilillah, because of course jihad cannot be waged without resources. So remember, we did not have any standing armies in the times of the Prophet. So the believers would generally, whenever the call would be made by the state, that they would undertake this war. And the thing that has also to be understood here is that this is a Medinan surah, and the call to jihad, or the call to wage war, can only be given by a state. No organization, no party, no group can wage war, as has now become the custom in so many parts of the world. The Quran is absolutely certain that war can only be waged by a state by the ruler of a state, he would give that signal, and the army or people who would gather under that banner would be the ones who can wage war. Other than that, we also know that from these verses that you wage war with those who have waged war against you, which means that you cannot wage war against civilians. So muqatilin is the Quranic word, which means combatants. Only people who are at war with you, who are attacking you, you can attack them. You cannot go right and left towards civilians or damage property. And this is something which is very evident from these Quranic verses, and which needs to be paid heed to, that civilians, however much they might be against you in their own reasoning or maybe in their own views, but remember, they are non-combatants. They are not fighting. So you are not allowed to fight against non-combatants. And we should see through our own lenses and through the lens of the Quran how today, and in some cases, we find that this extremely important directive of the Quran of bombarding civilians, of destroying public property, is going on unchecked in the name of God, and this is something that is despicable. It is absolutely against the Quran. So before I go forward, because we were now entering the directives of Hajj, if you have any questions regarding what we have studied until now, please raise them.
Shabana Ansari, please go ahead first.
डॉक्टर साहब, एक तो ये मुझे पूछना था कि उस वक्त तो जैसे शिर्क की हुकूमत हुआ करती थी और लोग जो है वो इस पर प्रोसिक्यूशन करते थे, तो अब अगर आज के दौर में इस्लाम को खुद अपने मुल्क में जबरदस्ती लोगों के ऊपर फोर्सफुली नाफिज किया जाए या पूरी दुनिया में, तो क्या ये प्रोसिक्यूशन नहीं कहलाएगा?
You see, persecution basically is to stop people for following their own ideology. So if you are talking about the fact that they are being stopped from following their own ideology and a new ideology is being imposed upon them, if this is what you are asking it, then yes, of course, because now you're not just stopping them, you're actually imposing it.
मैं उस सेंस में कह रही हूँ कि अहकाम जैसे कि जी बुर्के जबरदस्ती उड़ाना या दाढ़ी रखवाना, या वो अहकाम तो नहीं, आमतौर पे लोग नहीं फॉलो कर रहे होते ना, तो उस पे ये जैसे रिलीजियस ग्रुप्स बने हुए हैं छोटे छोटे हमारे मुल्क में भी और बाकी दुनिया में भी, तो वो फोर्सफुली चाहते हैं कि ये करें, तो वो मुसलमान आमतौर पे नहीं चाह रहे होते हैं, तो वो भी तो फिर रिलीजियस प्रोसिक्यूशन ही कहलाएगा?
Well, the word persecution is not appropriate in such instances. What you can say is that they are stepping out of their own authority. They just cannot do this because this is beyond their jurisdiction. So this is like doing something for which they have not been picked and chosen for. So persecution or fitna is a technical term of the Quran, which means that you are stopping people from practicing their religion. But forcing people to do something is another thing, and it cannot be termed as persecution. But yes, it is an oppression. It is an unjust act. It's a thing which cannot be done, cannot be perpetrated. And we are stepping out of bounds by interfering in the private lives of people, for which the Almighty will hold us accountable. So it's like crossing the limits.
और सर जैसे ये हमास ने जो हमला किया उन्होंने सिविलियंस पर ही किया ना, तो वो तो अरब है, उन्होंने नहीं पढ़ा हुआ कि सिविलियंस पर नहीं करना है हमला।
I mean,
और
this is something that right, Hamas has
वो कहते रहते हैं कि हमने लोगों को मारा, लेकिन उनके ऊपर कोई नहीं कहता कि वो भी मासूम थे।
Right. So, I mean, we have to be just and remain more in principle, talk in more principled terms, that anyone who is after the lives of civilians, whether it is Hamas, whether it's the PLO, whether it's the Israelites, whether it's the Bani Israel, or anyone, they would be flouting and not following what the Quran has said. So you just cannot pick up arms against civilians because they are deemed to be protected minorities or protected majority, as you can say. You cannot, I mean, the Quran is absolutely specific here. It says, yuqatilunakum. You kill them who kill you. You fight with them who fight with you. So only the combatants or muqatilin are the ones that you can raise your arms against.
Shukriya.
Thank you. Next up, we have Shabnam. Please go ahead.
Sir, as Allah says, sanctity of sacred months will continue to be observed. So, sir, present times में इनकी sanctity कैसे observe की जा सकती है?
So even today, if you remember, I mean, this is about 30 or years ago, when there was this Iran and Iraq war, this sanctity was maintained by them, because they would stop this war during those months, so that people could go for pilgrimage and they can offer their umrah. So today, if there is any war going on anywhere, or there's any strife or unrest, they have to make sure that this doesn't happen in those 4 months, because these are the 4 months in which people are going to travel. So you must have practically witnessed this if you were there, or that this never happened in those times.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions for now.
Okay. وَأَتِمُّوا الْحَجَّ وَالْأُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ فَإِنْ أُحْصِرْتُمْ فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدْيِ وَلَا تَحْلِقُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْهَدْيُ مَحِلَّهُ فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ بِهِ أَذًى مِنْ رَأْسِهِ فَفِدْيَةٌ مِنْ صِيَامٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ أَوْ نُسُكٍ فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ فمن تمتع بالأمرة إلى الحج فما استيسر من الهدي فمن لم يجد فصيام 3 أيام في الحج و7 إذا رجعتم. And if the way to Hajj and Umrah is open for you, then complete them with all their rites, for God only. However, if you are besieged in the way, sacrifice whatever offering that is available to you, and do not shave your heads until the sacrificial offerings have reached their destination. Then, if any of you is ill or suffers from an ailment of the head and is forced to shave his head before sacrificing an animal, he must atone for this either by fasting or by almsgiving or by offering an animal as sacrifice. Then, when circumstances become peaceful for you, anyone among you who derives this benefit that he offers Umrah also from this journey until the time of Hajj arrives, must offer animal sacrifice as can be made available. And if animal sacrifice is not available to him, fasts should be kept 3 during Hajj and 7 when people return. So now we see that the rites of Hajj and Umrah are being discussed. And as far as these rites are concerned, the Quran is absolutely certain that the proper way, of course, is to go and offer Hajj in the days of Hajj. But if one is traveling for Hajj or Umrah and he is besieged, as was the case in those times when the truce of Hudaybiyah took place in the times of the Prophet, then the Prophet had actually been asked by the Almighty to take off his ihram and do the animal sacrifice, and the Sahaba actually followed suit. So this is how it happened, and this is how it is described here, that if you have to do this, that you're traveling towards the Baytullah for Hajj, and you are besieged on the way, now you just cannot go forward, and you have to take off your ihram and do animal sacrifice, and this would suffice as your Hajj. This is the minimum requirement to do Hajj if you're not able to do it the way it should be done. So the Quran has made it amply clear that as far as these words are concerned, they have to be, or this directive is concerned, it has to be fulfilled in letter and in spirit. And the way the word Hajj is used, al-Hajju ashrum malumat, of course, and of course here, atimmul hajja wal umrah, we all know that the umrah that we generally call umrah is also called Hajjul Asghar. So Hajjul Akbar or Hajjul Asghar, Al-Hajjul Akbar is Hajj itself, and Al-Hajjul Asghar is Umrah. So the way that they have been mentioned here, they refer to the fact that yes, whether a person is doing Hajj or whether he's doing Umrah, then the days of these are absolutely known. And as far as the Quran is concerned, it tells us that this is something that you have to follow in all circumstances, because the Hajj, of course, has to be done in a way that unless you are able to do it in its full glory, the way the Quran has prescribed it, then if that is not possible, then you should do it in whatever way is possible. Now, the Quran has also made certain stipulations. It says, "La tahliku ru'usakum hatta yablugha al-hadyu mahilla," that you should not shave off your heads until your hadi, or your animals that you have brought for Hajj, they have reached their destination, which of course means the place of sacrifice. And if that is also not possible, then of course you have to sacrifice them wherever you are. And the philosophy of shaving off one's head, of course, has to be known, because this is a practice that Muslim men have been told to undertake when they are doing Hajj, that either they have a haircut or they shave off their heads. So in ancient times, the symbolism of shaving the head and appearing before the Almighty would be that you are now once again, you are coming into the servitude of God. So shaving off your head signified servitude to God. It is as if now you have presented yourself before the Almighty. So precisely for this reason, shaving of the head has been made a part of Hajj and Umrah, of course, this is done. And the philosophy is that when you do so, you actually present yourself in servitude as servants of God, and now you are there once again, and you have revived your pledge as a servant of God. But of course, then the Quran says, "Man kana minkum maridan," unless hatta yablu al-hadyu mahilla, you must not shave your heads until your hadi reaches this destination. But if this is not possible, and or you have violated this sequence, then the Quran says that you have to atone for it. So if you are a marid, for example, if you're unwell, and for as a result of this, you have to shave off your head before the hadi reaches its destination, then there is a certain atonement which the Quran has suggested here, which means that you either offer sadaqah or another animal, or as the Quran, or of course, as the Quran has said, first of all, that you fast for some days. And then the Quran has also given this very important concession. It says that people who do Hajj and Umrah in one journey, so which actually tells us that Hajj and Umrah should be undertaken in separate journeys, because both are very, very grand and glorious rituals, and in their own right, journeys should be conducted individually for each of them. But of course, this is not always possible. So the concession that the Quran has given is that if you conduct Hajj and Umrah, if you undertake Hajj and Umrah in the same journey, then you will have to offer some atonement. So the Quran says, فَمَنْ تَمَتَّعَ بِالْأُمْرَةِ إِلَى الْحَجِّ فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدْيِ. So whatever sacrifice that you do, you should do. So if you're combining Hajj and Umrah in a single journey, then this is what the Quran has prescribed for us. And if a person is not able to do sacrifice, then the Quran says you have to fast for 10 days, 3 during the time of Hajj when you were stationed there, and 7 when you return. But as we know that today, most Muslims, when they go for Hajj, they combine Hajj and Umrah in the same journey, and they do this animal sacrifice. This animal sacrifice is incumbent. This is an atonement, and very few people know that this is a sacrifice that is done not as a positive ritual in which you are presenting a sacrifice, as is the case with Hadi, but as an atonement of combining Hajj and Umrah together. So in fact, what we should know is that the real Qurbani, or the real animal sacrifice, which is of course an optional ritual of Hajj, is something that we should also try to make arrangements for. Although we know that this is something which is done in the form of coupons, and but we don't know that the Qurbani, or the animal sacrifice that we actually do there, is not this that we should do out of our own option as something which is rewarded or recommended, but we do animal sacrifice because we are combining Hajj and Umrah in one journey. So these are two separate sacrifices. So one is incumbent, one is farz, one is mandatory, because you're combining Hajj and Umrah, and the other is something which is recommended, which is doing animal sacrifice as a part of Hajj. But as I said, it's not an essential part of Hajj. But people have generally forgotten this optional Qurbani, or this optional sacrifice, and when they do that Tamattu Qurbani, they think that they're doing the same, where the two are entirely different, and we should know this difference. So the Quran says, وَسَبْعَةٍ إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ تِلْكَ عَشْرَةٌ كَامِلَةٌ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ أَهْلُهُ حَاضِرِ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. This concession to combine Hajj and Umrah in one journey in this way is only for those whose houses are not near the sacred mosque. Abide by this and keep fearing God, and you should fully know that God is stern in retribution. So the Quran is now further clarified that as far as this concession is concerned, this is not for people who are living there, because for them, doing separate journeys for Hajj and Umrah is very much possible. It is people who are living outside of that area, that for them this concession is there, that yes, when they're coming from outside, they can combine Hajj and Umrah. But people who are living there, I mean, it's always possible for them to do separate journeys, to make separate journeys for both these worship rituals. And so therefore also they should take this into account. And then it says, Al-Hajju Ashhurum Ma'lumat. فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ الْحَجَّ فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمْهُ اللَّهُ وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى وَاتَّقُونِ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. The months of Hajj are known. So anyone who intends to offer Hajj in them by wearing the ihram, then in this period of Hajj, he should not indulge in lustful activities, should refrain from being disobedient to the Almighty, and should abstain from any altercation. These are three very, very important guidelines which the Quran has given. So the first of them is Fala Rafasa, which means the word that the Quran has used here is that you should not be sexually intimate with your wives when you're doing Hajj. The second is Wala Fusuqa. You must not indulge in things which are counted as disobedience to God in any way. So, wala fusuq, wala jidala fil hajj, and do not indulge in any altercation, in any fight. And this is, of course, something which is absolutely part of Hajj itself, that when a person is doing Hajj, it's not an easy ritual because you have to do a lot of physical activity, which makes a person jittery, and he tends to be in a situation where he can easily provoke to be angry. So this is where the Quran has specifically given this guidance that wala jidala fil hajj, you must not fight. There should not be any altercation, because this is a supreme worship ritual in which you have traveled all the way to come to the house of God, and your concentration should be towards the house of God, towards fulfilling the rites and rituals of this very important worship, and also regard yourself to be lucky to have reached this place, because there are so many people who, in spite of having the wherewithal, the means, they are still not able to come for Hajj. So count yourself lucky, concentrate more on the rituals of these Hajj, and there should not be any altercation. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمْهُ اللَّهُ. So whatever good you do, God is aware of it. And in this journey of Hajj, you take along with you the provision of piety, because the best provision is this provision of piety. And for this, O men of intellect, keep fearing me. So again, a very important caution. It's like being cautioned that the biggest provision, the most important provision that you can take along during Hajj is the provision of piety. And what does piety means? It means that you live within your own bounds. You practice whatever has been required of you within the limits which have been prescribed by the Almighty. This is what piety is. And people who have gone for Hajj, they can recall this maybe, or they can share this experience that this does happen, that the biggest provision that in fact a person can take there is the provision of piety, which means that that intention that you have to visit the house of God without crossing the limits in any way, by indulging in lustful activities, by indulging in fights and disputes, while indulging in small talk, while spending time which is more of a wasteful nature. These are the things that are required, because this is a very specialized event. It's like a once in a lifetime chance that you might get. So you have to make the best use out of it. And this provision of piety is going to guard you. It's like a protective wall. It's not going to make you cross those limits and indulge in a lot of things that we are used to indulging when we are living in this world. So it's like concentrating ourselves in particular for what we have been sent there, or what has brought us there. Next, there are certain things which are mentioned regarding the Quraysh that they would do, and they would not follow the proper ritual of Hajj the way it has been prescribed for them, and their correction is now made in that regard. So the words are لَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَبْتَغُوا فَضْلًا مِّن رَبِّكُمْ فَإِذَا أَفَضْتُم مِّنْ عَرَفَاتٍ فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ عِندَ الْمَشْعَرِ الْحَرَامِ. So Mash'ar al-Haram is the name of Muzdalifah. وَاذْكُرُوهُ كَمَا هَدَاكُمْ وَإِن كُنتُم مِّن قَبْلِهِ لَمِنَ الضَّالِّينَ ثُمَّ أَفِيضُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَفَاضَ النَّاسُ وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. With this, however, it shall be no offense for you to seek the bounty of your Lord. But remember that Muzdalifah is no place of amusement and trading. So when you depart from Arafat, remember God near the sacred monument, and remember Him in the way He has guided you. And before this, you people were undoubtedly in error. Then this also is necessary, that you, O people of the Quraysh, also return from the place from where all other people return and seek the forgiveness of God. So this is the part which the Quraysh have been corrected, and I'm just going to explain it presently. And seek the forgiveness of God. Surely God is ever forgiving, most merciful. So as far as these rituals are concerned, the Quran says that they have to be followed in letter and spirit. So in normal circumstances, the place and time of Hajj sacrifice is known. However, in circumstances referred to here, the place of sacrifice is the one where a person has been surrounded that we have just mentioned. So we have to understand that as far as the Hajj and Umrah are concerned, they have to be offered at places that they are designated for, or these places which are designated for certain rituals. And this also is a very important reminder for us, because we've been discussing this earlier on, that as far as these rituals are concerned, they predate the Quran. It's not that the Quran is initiating them in any way. They were already being offered. So Hajj, for example, was being offered since the time of Abraham. There were certain innovations and distortions that had crept in, and the Quran has set them right on most occasions. And for this reason, it is important to note that if you want to derive the Hajj ritual from the Quran, you'll not be able to do so, because it's not mentioned there anywhere. All that the Quran does, so it makes those corrections and also sounds reminders. It's not going to guide us as far as Hajj is concerned, because it's a pre-existing sunnah of the Prophet Abraham. So what the Quran has said here is that as far as the Quraysh are concerned, we know that we know that from the way that was taught by the Prophet, that they should only worship God without any adulteration of polytheism and customs of Jahiliyyah. And the reason for this statement that I've just described to you is that in the age of Jahiliyyah, when people reached Muzdalifah, instead of glorifying the Almighty and expressing gratitude and remembering Him, they would light up fires and assemble for expressing their own superiority, and they were indulged in all sorts of these debates. So that is why the Quran has said that you glorify God instead of discussing the feats and the achievements of your own elders or your ancestors. The reason that the Quraysh are told that they should offer the Hajj the way it should be done is that the Quraysh, they used to assemble at Mina to eulogize their forefathers, and they should now assemble, the Quran says, in order to understand that as far as the Quran is concerned, to glorify the Almighty. So the Quraysh actually did not consider going to the Arafat as a mandatory part of Hajj, and they would return from Muzdalifah. So they would not go to Arafat. They would just return from Muzdalifah, thinking that Arafat lies beyond the hudud of Haram. And they would think that, well, being the custodians of the Kaaba, it's not incumbent upon them to go to Arafat. The Quran has corrected them here and said, Summa afizu min haysu afadun nas, that you also go to Arafat the way people go to Arafat. So again, this is a correction which the Quran has made here. And as far as the Quran is concerned, this is what it has done in most occasions, or most occasions, that it is going to correct some of the misgivings and malpractices of the Quraysh. فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُم مَنَاسِكَكُمْ فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَذِكْرِكُمْ آبَاءَكُمْ أَوْ أَشَدَّ ذِكْرًا فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ أُولَئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا كَسَبُوا وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. And this also, that after this, when you have completed your rites of Hajj, remember God as you have been remembering your forefathers earlier. In fact, even more. This is the time of asking from God. But there are also some among people who at even this instance only say, Lord, whatever you intend to give us in this world. And then the result of this is that they have no share in the world to come. And there are others among them whose prayer is, Lord, give us what is good in this world also, and in the world to come also, and save us from the torment of the fire. It is these who will receive a share of their earning, and swift is God in taking account. So again, this reminder that as far as the journey of Hajj is concerned, if there are things that you have to do. For example, there could be trade and other related activities which are commercial in nature. So that is something which is not forbidden if the time is there for them to stay there. but at the same time glorifying the Almighty. Once you have finished the Hajj, the rituals of Hajj, and glorifying them the way the Quraysh would mention their own elders is something which the Quran says that they should do. In fact, they should do it even more because God has more right over them. And at this time, the proper prayer is that God, you grant me good from this world and you good from good in the hereafter as well. But there are some people who just want the good of this world. So, Rabbana Atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirat. This is what you should ask for, that God give us good in this world and in the next world, and not like some people who say that we would only like the good of this world. So the Quran says that people who only ask good for this world, ma lahu fil akhirati min khalaq, they'll have no share in the hereafter. And this is something of a very big, a huge deprivation. And then wazkurullaha fi ayyamin ma'dudat faman ta'ajjala fi yawmayni fala ithma alayhi wa man ta'akhkhara fala ithma alayhi liman ittaqa wattaqullah wa'lamu annakum ilayhi tuhsharun. And remember God in the few appointed days at Mina. Then he who showed haste and departed in 2 days incurs no sin also. And he who stays on longer also incurs no sin. But indeed, for those who fear God, and you should also keep fearing God and be well aware that one day you shall be gathered before him alone. So this is the time when the Hajis or the pilgrim, they stay in Mina, and the Quran says that if you stay there for 2 days, it is fine. But if you are in a hurry, then the minimum amount of stay is 2 days. But if people stay after that, the Quran says, this is one ta'akhkhara fala ithma alayhi. If people who go beyond those 2 days, it is fine, as long as the purpose is liman ittaqa, people who are going to adhere to taqwa, and they should know that God is someone who knows them, and he's going to gather them on the day of judgment. And the scene which is portrayed here is just as people are now gathered in the area around of Hajj, in that section called Arafat. The way they are gathered there, the Almighty is going to gather them on the day of judgment. So it's going to be a huge gathering, and people can have a very, 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 very minuscule idea of that gathering when they see this huge sea of human beings at Arafat, worshipping the Almighty, reflecting the fact that one day this field of Arafat is going to convert into the field of the Day of Judgment, in which every person among humankind will be gathered before the Almighty. So they must not forget that this gathering is just one gathering in which they are worshipping the Almighty. There's another gathering coming up in which all of them will be gathered before the Almighty. So this brings us to an end to this section of verses. Inshallah, in our next sessions, we will be covering the next part of this surah. And if you have any questions, you can raise them now. Otherwise, I'm going to start with the literal translation of the passage that we have discussed today.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We have a bunch of questions. So Shazia Khan, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sir.
Walaikum.
I have 2 questions. One is very small. The first, where it says that you should cut your hair until if you are not able to go to to do the Hajj or the Umrah. Was that before Hudaybiyah or after Hudaybiyah?
See, that was at the time of Hudaybiyah. This is something which was revealed. I mean, these verses are the verses which were revealed at the time of Hudaybiyah, because people were not able to reach the Khana Kaaba at that time. So they are being told that, well, if you are not able to go yourself, you can send your hadi or your animals there. And unless they reach their destination, you should not shave off their heads. But if that is also not possible, which was the case in Hudaybiyah, because animal sacrifice was also not possible by sending the animals all the way to the Kaaba, so animal sacrifice took place right at that time. So this was a very opportune moment for the Almighty to tell us that, well, this is the case which you're not experiencing. But if the case is that you're besieged and you're not able to travel yourself, but you can send those animals, then unless that sacrifice is complete, you should not shave off your heads.
Okay, so we are sure about the timeline of this ayah then.
Right.
Yeah. The question, more important one, is for people who are who live in around Masjid al-Haram. So for them, how do they do Hajj and Umrah? They still go to Miqat, they do their Ihram, and then they come back. For people who are coming from outside, it is a we still like go for Hajj, and if we have to do Umrah, then we go back to Miqat, we change Ihram, we come. How is it that for us we have to fast and they don't have to fast for doing that?
That fasting, that fasting is because of doing Hajj in the same journey. I mean,
yeah, but what journey do they take? So if they are living in Makkah,
so they are not even given this concession actually. So they'll have to do Hajj and Umrah in separate journeys. So this does not arise for them in any case.
No, but
because
they live there.
To live there, of course. That is what I'm saying. So people who are living there, they are going to do Hajj and Umrah separately. For them, this directive is not even applicable. This is applicable for people who are coming from outside and they are combining Hajj and Umrah in one journey.
So journey for us is going from here to Makkah.
Yeah.
The journey for them.
Yes, that's it.
What is the journey for them? Like, what does the journey
There is
mean?
no journey for them. I mean, for them, this concession is not involved in the first place. For them, they have to do Hajj and Umrah separately. I mean, separately means at the time of Hajj, they'll do Hajj. And other than that, whenever it's possible for them, they'll do Umrah.
Yeah, but so they are privileged then. It's not like a concession.
I mean,
They're
it's like
they can do anytime. They don't have to journey.
But remember, in spite of the fact that they are living there, it's not always easy to do Umrah and Hajj. Who are people who are living there because of the quota which is there, and of course for the reason that even if you have to go to do Hajj and Umrah, you're still not living at times within the bounds of the Haram. You might be living in a far off place, for example, in Makkah, or maybe even further from that in Jeddah, or slightly removed from that place as well. So remember, journey is from within the precincts of the Baytullah. Anything outside that would count as a journey.
Okay, that was it. Thank you, Jazakallah.
Shabana Ansari, please go ahead.
डॉक्टर साहब आपने ये बताया कि इसमें जो है हज और उम्रे को कंबाइन करना, तो जैसे हम लोग भी जब जाते हैं तो हम पहले उम्रा करते हैं और उसके बाद जब हज का टाइम आता है तो हज करते हैं, तो इसमें आप क्या ये कह रहे हैं कि वो जो हम कुर्बानी करते हैं वो हदी की नहीं होती बल्कि वो इनको कंबाइन करने की होती है?
राइट, दैट इज
तो वो क्या होती है? और वो जो रोजों की बात,
कफारा, दैट इज द
अटोनमेंट जिसको आपने कहा,
अटोनमेंट, यस
जी। तो ये हदी की नहीं होती बल्कि अटोनमेंट की होती है, तो फिर हदी की कुर्बानी वो फर्ज नहीं है?
That's not mandatory, but it is recommended that you do it separately. So believers and Muslims, they should do two qurbanis, two sacrifices. One is mandatory because they are combining Hajj and Umrah in one journey, and the other is optional and recommended. So therefore, if they know this difference, it is highly recommended that, of course, they cannot do away with the obligatory one. But the other one is something that we have just forgotten, that this was also there. People think that once they have done the tamattu qurbani, that is all that was required of them. So we need to revive this once again in our minds, that basically these are two sacrifices. One is mandatory, which we cannot avoid, and the other one is recommended, which we should try to do as far as possible.
तो अब क्या करें? एक ही किए.
I mean, if you because you see, this was something that you never knew when you went for Hajj. So I mean, if ever you get the chance again, this is something that you can do, and at least, if not possible for your own self, then you can tell your children and your grandchildren and the people around you who are going for Hajj that, well, this is something that you must keep in mind, because people have generally forgotten it. So maybe by reminding other people and by making them realize this, you also get some reward.
Okay, thank you.
Bismat Timizi Ahmed, you're up next, please.
So yeah, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. My question is exactly continuation of the question the lady asked before me. So basically, there are two qurbanis if you're in Makkah at the time of Hajj. One is for the atonement because you combine it. The second one is the one that people outside Makkah do, the Baqarah Eid qurbani. So that is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that is the sacrifice that is being done, and I mean, for them it is being done as an Eid qurbani. That is something else. But for people who are doing Hajj, they don't celebrate Eid. For them, that is sacrifice is something which is part of the Hajj ritual. So you see, it is part of the Hajj ritual. For others, it is part of the Eid ritual. So these are two separate things.
So then basically for people who've gone for Hajj, there are two qurbanis. The one we do is the Eid one, which is outside Makkah, they do one for the atonement, and the second one they're doing is the ritual that is the part of Hajj, but that is optional.
That is optional.
That's an
Yes, and this is something which we have. I mean, most of us have forgotten because it's an optional
okay.
thing, and
Huh.
because they've already done a qurbani, they think that this is what they have already offered.
But the lady who asked you right before me, so if she hasn't done it, it's still optional, right? So then if it's an
optional,
option,
of
then it's an
course.
option. So yeah.
I mean, it's an
Okay.
optional, but she might be thinking, well, she could have done so if she was there. Even if it's an option, it's a recommended thing. So,
Okay.
I mean, of course, it's not an obligation.
It's not optional.
You
Okay.
see,
Okay. Thank
there is another important thing which I'd like to take opportunity to discuss here. That you see, the spirit of religion is also one thing. I mean, you're not always indulging in what is mandatory. You do more above. I mean, you go above board. You go beyond the call of your duty, as we can say. That religion itself is something which stems from our inner nature. And the more we practice, the more we are able to do our tazkiyah. So remember, this tazkiyah or this inner purification is something which is achieved more through these optional acts of worship, like extra prayers, like extra fasts, like if we are able to do umrah, and similarly spend more than zakah. So basically, if you have to become a better human being, it's through these recommended yet non-obligatory, non-mandatory rituals and things that have been prescribed. Because you see, the purpose for us is to become high achievers in religion. And to become a high achiever, why should we remain at the borderline in which we are just passing through? So the objective is to become, or to take ourselves as high as possible. And for this, we should be on the lookout to do these good deeds as much as we can in the spirit that, well, this is something which is going to make us shine from inside. And another thing that I'd like to remind ourselves here is that rituals, I mean, all these worship rituals, whether it is the prayer or the zakah or the hajj or the charity or animal sacrifice, they are not an end in themselves. They are a means to an end. And the end is to become a better person. So if our rituals are not making us a better person, then there is something wrong in our understanding, because we have thought that these rituals are an end in themselves. They are not an end. They are not, an objective per se. They are a means to achieving another end. So this Hajj, what is this Hajj? It's basically the self-purification exercise that we are doing. It's this symbolism of passing, of doing that struggle for the cause of God that we are undertaking. So if we understand the essence of these worship rituals, we'll use these worship rituals to become better persons.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, you're up next. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
मेरा सवाल यह है कि आपने भी फरमाया कि जो अहले कुरैश थे वो मुज़्ज़िला से वापस आ जाते थे, लेकिन वो तो हम तो मुज़्ज़िला पे जाते हैं, अराफात से होके फिर जाते हैं वहां।
So they would never go to Arafat. I mean, it's like a journey which we go ahead and then we come back.
जी।
So they would not go to that place in the first place. I mean, they would just bypass it. Because they would think that Arafat lies outside the precincts of Haram, the hudud of Haram. So they would just remain within them.
मैं ये समझ रहा था किस तरह हम तो पहले अराफात जाते हैं फिर वापस मुज़्ज़िला पे आकर रात गुजारते हैं।
Right. So they would not go to Arafat. They would just go to until Muzdalifah. I mean, instead of going to Arafat and then going back to Muzdalifah, they would just go to Muzdalifah and not go to Arafat.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions.
Okay, so we do have some time, so we will utilize this time to start our literal translation. Start off with verse 186. It says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Wa and Iza when Sa'alaka you ask Ibadi me, my servants. Sa'alaka ibadi, or you can say my servants. So ibad is the Quranic word which is the plural of abd, and the plural of abd is ibad, and ibadi would be my servants, and sa'alaka would mean they ask you. I mean you, of course, implying the Prophet. So wa iza sa'alaka ibadi anni is actually an-i. So anni is about me. So the Quran is telling the Prophet when my servants question you about me or regarding me. So, iza sa'alaka, when my servants ask you, O Prophet, regarding me, fa inni qareeb, fa, therefore, inni, I, qareeb, near. So I am near them. I'm not anywhere which is not beyond their access, because the Quran is being revealed and you can ask any question. And that is what precisely the next part says. Ujibu da'wa tadda'i. Ujibu means I answer. God is saying, I answer. Da'wa, the call. Ad-da'i, who calls. Iza, when. Da'ani, he calls me. So I answer the call of the people who call me, which means that whenever they ask me something, I respond to them, which means that if they would ask questions from the Prophet regarding something that needs an explanation and it needs to be furnished by me, then I'm going to supply that information or that answer. So, fal yastajibu li. Fa, therefore, yastajibu li, follow me. Istajibu means you follow, li, me, wa, and wal yu'minu bi, and have faith in me. So the idiomatic translation would be, therefore follow me and have faith in me. La'allahum yarshudun. La'alla, so that whom they, yarshudun, are guided. So the idiomatic translation would be that when my servants ask you, O Prophet, about me, of course, when it says me, it actually means some of what I have told them, or my directives. Tell them I am close to them. I answer the calls of the caller when he calls me. So therefore, let them follow me. Yastajibu li. So the Quran is telling the Prophet that let them follow me and let them have faith in me, so that they are guided. Yarshudun. Rashada yarshudu means to guide, and this is the plural yarshudun, so that they are guided. Uhilla lakum laylat as-siyam rafasu ila nisaikum. Uhilla means it has become allowed, it is legal. Lakum, for you. Layla, night. As-siyam, of the fast. Rafasu ila nisaikum. So this is a compound word. Rafasa ila nisa means to have intimate relations with the wife. So nisaikum would mean your wives. So literally or idiomatically, the translation would be that it is lawful for you. Uhilla lakum. It is lawful for you on the nights of the fast to be intimate with your wives. It is lawful for you to be intimate with your wives in the nights of the fast. Hunna, they. They means referring to the wives. Hunna libasun lakum. They are libas of you. They are a garment to you. Va, and antum, you. Libasul lahunna, garment to them. So they are a garment to you and you are a garment to them. Alim Allahu. Alima, knew. Allah, God. So God knew. Annakum, that you. Kuntum takhtanuna, were being dishonest, were deceiving. Anfusakum, your own selves. Fataba alaykum, therefore he forgave you. Wa'afa ankum, and ignored you, and also relented towards you, which means that idiomatically we can say that God knew that you were dishonest to your own selves. Takhtanun is from khayanat. Takhtanun meaning that you were dishonest. Anfusakum, to your own selves. Fataba alaykum, so God ignored you, or God forgave you, and he relented towards you. Afa ankum, which means that he forgave you. Fal'an, so basically this word is fa'al-an, and when you read it jointly it would be fal'an. So fal'an would be therefore now. Bashiruhunna, be intimate with them. Bashiruhunna, be intimate with them. Wabtaghu, and find. Ma kataballahu lakum, what God has ordained for you. Ma kataballahu lakum is a compound word or an expression meaning what God has written for you. Literally, it means what God has written for you, of course, signifying the fact what He has ordained for you. Wa and kulu, eat. Wa and ushrubu, ishrabu, drink. Hatta, until. Yatabayyana, becomes evident. Lakum, to you. Al khaytul abiyad. Al khayt means the string, or it means the thread actually. Abiyad is white, the white thread. Min, from. Al khayt, al aswad. Al khayt is the thread, aswad is black. So idiomatically it would mean you eat and you drink until becomes evident to you the white thread from the black thread of dawn. Of course, referring to the fact when night disappears and the day dawns upon you. This is what is meant. This is expressed in highly literary language. Thumma, therefore, atimmu, you complete, as-siyam, your fasts, ilal layl, until nightfall. Therefore, you complete your fast until or to the extent of nightfall. Wa, and. La, not. Tubashiruhunna, be intimate with them, referring to their wives. Wa antum aqifuna fil masajid. Wa, and. Antum, you. Aqifuna, are in i'tiqaf. Fi, in. Al masajid, which is the plural of masjid, referring to the mosques. So do not be intimate with them when you are residing in the mosques for i'tiqaf. Tilka hududullah. Tilka, these. Hududullah, limits of God, bounds of God. So hudud is the plural of had, which means limit or bound, and plural would mean bounds. So these are the bounds of God. In other words, these are the restrictions of God. Fala, therefore not. Taqrabuha, go near them. Taqrabuha, go near them. La taqrabuha, do not go near them. So these are the restrictions of God. These are the bounds of God. So therefore, do not go near them. Kazalika, in this way, yubayyinullahu, God makes evident. Ayatihi, His revelations. Ayat is the plural of ayah, and ayat means revelations. In this way, God makes evident His revelations linnas, for people. Linnas, for people. La'allahum, so that they, yattaqun, become pious. So in this way, God explains His verses, explains His revelations for people so that they become pious. So I'm going to end here because we are almost running out of time now. Inshallah, in our next sessions, we will be completing the remaining part of the idiomatic and literal translation. And one announcement that I'm going to make now before we end our the session today is that the next 3 weeks will be off because I would be traveling and taking these sessions would not be possible. Inshallah, we will resume our sessions on the 23rd and 24th of December of next month. So it's almost a month of holidays that we will observe. And inshallah, we'll meet again on the 23rd of December.
Thank you very
So
much,
with that-
Dr. Saleem.